Hey everyone, welcome back to the So Cultured podcast. We are back with another.
As you're getting Australian. You're
Wait,
becoming
what?
Australian because you just said, welcome back to the SOR. You know how Australian people go, the SOR?
So Cultured
Sorry, Cultured
podcast.
Podcast. I love that.
Oh,
Yes, welcome back,
God.
everyone. Welcome back. Brand new episode.
It is quite rare that the Australian comes through, but they go through. Anyway, it's seeping back into the accent. You guys might notice that, but it beats the Southeast London accent. Sorry if you have that as well. But anyway, well, welcome back to episode 2 of What If by the So Cultured podcast. Obviously, if you're enjoying this season, please do give us a little like on whatever platform you're listening on, or drop us a comment if you are super invested in this season. But I'm gonna
Wait, because some of the listeners might not have listened to episode 1. So, quick overview of the brand new season. The brand new season, as Taz just said, is called What If. Basically, on this season, we're going to be tackling some stupid questions. Like, what if we fell into a black hole? What if there's another pandemic? We're just going to be asking some stupid questions and then tackling the science behind these questions, because we wanted a season that would allow us to encapsulate like a broad range of scientific questions and fields. Anyway, Taz, fire away. The philosophical question of the week.
Okay, philosophical question of the week is: if aliens landed on Earth and the first thing they saw was a pigeon and then they left Earth, what conclusions do you think they would make about Earth?
Oh my God. That it was boring. Because I think they look a bit boring, don't they, pigeons? Do you know what I mean? Like, they just look a bit boring.
Do they?
Yeah, do you not think?
If the first thing you're seeing is a pigeon, I would be like, what the fuck is this?
Well, I guess it depends on what the aliens look like. If they were birds as well, they'd be like, oh, well, this is really cool because there's like other things like us. But then on the other hand, if they looked completely different, they would be really interested in it, because I just think pigeons look a bit boring.
Also, if we talk about like evolution and stuff, obviously we are like, I don't know, somewhat descended from dinosaurs, and so are birds. But birds are kind of like more closely linked to dinosaurs, right? They kind of look like dinosaurs, but with feathers. So if we're talking about like alien life on another planet and like in terms of evolution, then maybe they would look more like birds than humans.
Taz, it's a really interesting that you bring this up, because we will be discussing this on today's episode. So, you're so smart. She's such a smart girl, honestly. But realistically, what do pigeons do? They fly around. They like peck on a little bit of chip on the floor. Yeah. Or if I'm thinking of seagulls, I don't know. Do pigeons steal food? I think they do, don't they?
No, not really.
No?
That's another thing. If aliens came to Earth and they saw seagulls and then left, their conclusions would be totally different than if they saw pigeons and then left, because seagulls are nasty, and very loud creatures, whereas pigeons they kind of just do a little and then like that's it, and they're just chill, and seagulls are actually quite friendly.
Seagulls I think are pretty evil, actually.
Yeah,
you know, I've witnessed 100%. Them do some heinous things, like steal children's ice creams on the beach.
I used to go to Sussex University, and when I tell you, there was this one seagull that would conveniently place itself on campus, and whenever there was like a student like running through campus with food, aka my housemate at the time, she was eating toast and like running to a lecture. Huh?
Did you used to have to run?
It was a 9 a.m. lecture, and she was eating toast and like running to it. Anyway, so she was eating toast. This seagull swoops down and takes the toast out of her mouth.
No.
And ever since then, she's been petrified of seagulls. Yeah, so aliens would just find that scary, I think.
Well, there we go. If we want to put aliens off from coming to Earth, just whack out seagulls. Anyway, listen, talking of aliens, we are tackling the question of what if we found life on another planet. aka it could be aliens. So let's get into it. Welcome to the So Cultured podcast,
where we explore science and tech unfiltered.
We're your hosts, Liv and Taz, two girls who love STEM and spilling the tea.
Each season, we take on a new theme, whether it's busting conspiracy theories, celebrating women in STEM, or breaking down the science in your favourite sci-fi films.
And of course, in every episode, we spill the laboratory,
where we share your wildest stories from the world of science.
Let's get into this week's episode of So Cultured. Okay, Taz, you know those weeks where 5 days just somehow feels like 5 months? Like that kind of week where everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. None of your experiments have worked the way they were supposed to. And your inbox is so full that like just the thought of opening it feels stressful. I don't know about you, but when it's that kind of week, by the time Friday evening finally arrives, I'm just completely done. So for me, there's only one solution for those kind of weeks. I will put on my comfies. You might pour yourself a cold glass of Prosecco, order in your favourite sushi, and you'll finally settle down on the sofa to catch up with your show. For the first time all week, nobody needs anything from you. But then 5 minutes into the episode, imagine the screen cuts to black. And at first, you just assume maybe the Wi-Fi has glitched or your flatmate is messing with you from the other room. But then a warning sound starts blaring through the TV, and an emergency broadcast flashes up on the screen. In bold letters across the middle of the screen, it says, "Life found on another planet." You actually laugh at first because it sounds ridiculous, but it doesn't go away. You change the channel and every single station is saying the same thing. Scientists have confirmed that life has been discovered beyond Earth. And in that moment, the whole atmosphere changes because the first thought is not awe or excitement or even fear. You're just thinking, what now? Well, in today's episode, we are talking about exactly that. What would really happen if we found life on another planet?
I'm not going to lie, I'm still hung up on the fact that I was midway through drinking my Prosecco and eating my sushi, to be honest. So I would be pretty pissed if that came on the screen.
Girl, you can still drink it. Aliens, no problem. Just keep drinking your Prosecco and your sushi.
Okay, right. When we speak, that's fine then. That's fine. When we speak of aliens, I feel like when people hear that, they immediately picturing little green aliens. But realistically, when scientists say they found life, what do they actually mean?
Yeah. Well, don't worry. We're not going to completely lose focus of the green aliens. We're going to come back to them at the end. Okay. But scientifically, that sounds like it should be a really easy question to answer, but it actually isn't. Because life feels really obvious, like when we're looking at persons, like I'm looking at Taz right now, it's really obvious she's alive, she's a living thing. Or like when you're looking at a dog, a tree, or maybe even a bacterium under a microscope. But the moment you actually try to define it properly, things start to get a little bit messy. So in astrobiology, one of the most widely used working definitions comes from NASA, and it describes life as a self-sustaining chemical system capable of Darwinian evolution. Now, that basically means that something can maintain itself, it uses chemistry to keep going, and also reproduce in a way that allows evolution by natural selection to happen over time. So if we break that down a little bit more simply, scientists are basically looking for a few core features. So first up, we're looking for some kind of metabolism, which means that it basically takes in and it uses energy. Secondly, we're also looking for the ability to reproduce or at least replicate. And that's interesting when it comes to viruses, which we'll talk more about later. And thirdly, the ability to respond to its environment in some way. So whether that might be like moving towards food, reacting to chemicals, or adjusting to changes around it. So those are the broad signs that something is not just a weird chemical reaction, but it's something that's actually behaving like biology. And that is really important because if we ever were to find something on another planet, scientists are not just going to look at it and go, yeah, that looks alive. Like they're actually going to have to ask whether it is doing the kind of things that living systems do. Of this definition from NASA, right? But interestingly, even on Earth, we actually don't really fully agree on where the line is. And viruses, as you will know, Taz, are the classic example of that because viruses do have genetic material, they do evolve, and they do reproduce in a sense. but they do this only by hijacking the machinery of a host cell. So on their own, they are not self-sustaining. They don't have their own metabolism and they can't replicate independently, which is why a lot of scientists do not classify them as fully alive in the traditional sense. So already before we've even left Earth, the category of life is a bit blurry. And that is what makes this so interesting, because if life is already hard to define here, where we know what biology looks like, imagine how difficult it could actually be on another planet. That is why finding alien life would not just be a case of spotting something weird and calling it an organism. It would actually be a huge scientific process of asking, is it genuinely alive, or is it something that just looks a bit like life from a distance?
Just going back to your virus point, though, I'm going to add a caveat to this.
Go for it.
And I don't know whether you touch on it later, but obviously we spoke about the origins of viruses in our season related to the origins of. And we were going to try and argue like whether viruses came before like bacteria or whether they came like after. And it's kind of been decided that they came after bacteria because like they need to replicate in cells. And I'm thinking like even if we saw viruses on another planet, then that is evidence of life because they require cells to replicate. So it could be evidence of like life in the past that no longer is there anymore, kind of thing.
That's a really interesting point, yeah.
But anyway, going back to the definition of life and stuff, surely we would completely be past that like definition stage if we just saw a fully formed alien just there looking back at us, you know? That's wishful thinking, maybe, but do you know what I mean?
I actually knew you were going to say that because no, you're so valid. To be fair, obviously that is possible. Like anything is possible. Like if you just found some kind of complex organism moving around on the surface of like another planet and it was clearly behaving like an animal or some kind of like visible living thing, and maybe it would even talk to us, then yes, that would be a much easier case to make. Like if something is walking, reacting, blah blah blah, then obviously that's going to be biological and scientists are not going to sit there and be like, okay, is it alive? That would be a very different situation. So I think it's important to say that when we talk about finding life on another planet, we are not saying that it's impossible, that it could be something really dramatic or obvious. In theory, obviously, it absolutely could be. But realistically, that is probably not what we would find first. And the reason for that is basically Earth itself. So if we look at the history of life on this planet, as Taz kind of just hinted at, life started out really simple and it stayed simple for most of Earth's history. So for billions of years, Earth was not full of animals and plants and really complex ecosystems like the ones that we know of now, but it was actually dominated by single-celled organisms. So if life have emerged elsewhere, the safest assumption is not that it has become intelligent or even complex yet, although not entirely impossible, but that it might still be in a much earlier, simpler form, which is why when scientists talk seriously about the search for alien life, they are usually not imagining little green men. They are imagining microbes.
Yeah, I feel like when you get older, that's like the harsh reality of finding out like whether aliens exist or not. It's like, oh, they're not these little green men. They are like probably going to be bacteria. Like how boring is that?
Okay,
a lot less glamorous.
Stay tuned for the end of the episode, okay? Because I have like an interesting little nugget of like, if you are excited by that, then you need to keep listening.
Obviously, yeah. Okay, fine. But obviously, I guess we can assume that microbes is a bit more realistic than like fully formed little green men.
100%.
Much to my dismay.
And I know they sound boring, but let me give you my case, okay? Because microbes are still a huge deal. I think people do hear like microbes, microbial life, and immediately, like you said, we do feel a little bit underwhelmed. It can feel like, oh, you know, we just found like some alien mold or something. But it actually still would be one of the biggest discoveries in human history. And it also makes so much sense when you think about the kinds of places that life can survive here. So on Earth, we have organisms called extremophiles, and these are mostly microbes that live in environments that sound completely uninhabitable to us. So some of these microbes can survive in boiling hot water. Some live in like really highly acidic environments. Some of them thrive deep underground with no sunlight, and some can survive in places with like extreme salt, pressure, or just cold temperatures. So over time, extremophiles have completely changed our understanding of what counts as a habitable environment. And they have shown us that life is way more adaptable than we used to think.
So I guess every time we find something on Earth in a place where that like seems absolutely horrific, it might make scientists go, okay, maybe they can survive somewhere weird in space too.
Yeah, 100%. Like the idea of extremophiles definitely like widens the map or like widens the search, because it kind of, like you said, it makes you realize that when we picture a planet that supports life, we shouldn't just imagine somewhere that looks like Earth with like blue skies, nice forests, nice oxygen, breathable air. Life might not actually need anything that familiar. It might be tucked away under ice, deep underground, or floating around in some chemical environment that would just be completely toxic to us as humans, or like life as we know it on Earth.
Yeah, which I guess kind of raises the question, because people talk about life on other planets. Everyone kind of seems to go straight to Mars because I guess like it's closest to us, but it's not just Mars, is it? There's so many places that we could be looking. Isn't there? I feel like there's an equation for it, like whether like it
Yeah.
would be habitable or not. I can't
Yeah, I remember the
remember.
first time I learned about this equation. I was like, that's so cool. So, for any of the listeners who don't know, what Taz is talking about is something called the Drake equation. And it's written as like n equals r star something, something, something. Like it's a really long equation. It's like pi, like
Yeah,
it just goes on forever. Like, I don't, what is pi? Do you know what the pi number is? Because I don't.
3.14 something.
Oh my gosh. But it goes on for like a long time, right? Keeps on
It's
going.
infinity pretty much.
Yeah, it's like I who was I watching the other day? Hannah Fry on her podcast, and she was just like reeling it off. I was like, this is why I'm
I
not
know
friends with
that
Hannah Fry.
yeah, but she did maths, didn't she? She's a
Oh, true, true.
mathematician,
Yeah, fair.
so
Okay.
reel it off, babes.
Read it off, babe. She is an icon. Anyway,
She
so
is.
essentially, the Drake equation is an equation for estimating how many detectable alien civilizations there might be in the Milky Way right now. And this equation uses things like how often stars form, how many of them have planets, how many of those planets could support life, and then the much harder questions like how often life actually appears, becomes intelligent, develops technology, and lasts long enough for us to notice it. So the Drake equation is actually all about finding like intelligent green alien men, basically. So if you're interested in that, you should definitely read more about the Drake equation. But this is where things get really interesting, because when we ask where we would most likely find life, the answer, like we've just talked about, is not just one place. Now, Mars gets the most attention because it is nearby, it's relatively accessible, and we know that it used to have liquid water on its surface a very long time ago. So Mars is a really important target, especially if we're looking for signs of past microbial life or maybe even present life hidden below the surface. But Mars is not the only option, and in some ways, it's really not even the most exciting option, which is kind of ironic because it's the one we always think about all the time.
You know what? I'm actually reading a book at the moment, or like a book series called Red Rising, and it's about humans in the very, 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 very far future. And it talks about how we've inhabited other planets by like terraforming them and making them habitable
Oh
for
my gosh.
humans. So I find it's actually a really good series. It's Red Rising, and it's a book series, and it talks about like how humans have advanced, and it's very like sci-fi and stuff.
Interesting. That's
But yeah, I
interesting.
find it interesting, and it kind of links to this because it also
Yeah.
talks about inhabiting the other planets as well.
When you said terraforming, I was just thinking about Animal Crossing.
Well,
Anyway.
do you know what I was thinking? I was like, maybe we should do an episode on what if we inhabited Mars or like another planet? Like, what
Yeah,
would it
that would be
actually
so good.
take to inhabit
That's a great idea.
Mars?
Guys, let us know if you want that episode, because
Yeah.
I would be really interested in that. That's definitely, I would, yeah. Yes, let's do that. Anyway, going back to this episode, let's stay focused. One of the most promising places in our own solar system, I was surprised to find out, are actually icy moons. Now, Europa, which is one of Jupiter's moons, is a huge one. Then we also have Enceladus, which is one of Saturn's moons, which is another. And the reason scientists get so excited about them is because beneath their icy outer layers, there is actually really strong evidence that they have subsurface oceans of liquid water. So even though from the outside they look frozen and dead, underneath that ice, it is totally possible that there may be environments where the ingredients for life are present.
That is actually mad. Like, I've never even really considered moons. Like, we think about the solar system, but like we don't really, and we just think about planets. I had never really thought about moons, to be honest. But yeah, that is really interesting. But my question is, why haven't we like tested this theory like and gone there with like robots and stuff?
Well, we will get to that in a minute. We will get to that in a minute because yeah. But just before we go on to that topic, I just want to quickly talk about planets beyond our solar system, because when you start looking at that, it just honestly it gets kind of ridiculous, because we have something called exoplanets, which are planets orbiting other stars. And we actually now know that they're incredibly common. So NASA has already confirmed more than 6,000 of them. Some are rocky worlds and some sit in what is called the habitable zone, which basically means that they are at the right distance from their star for liquid water to potentially exist. That does not mean that they are inhabited, but it means the search for life suddenly became so much bigger than just Mars. So we are talking about thousands of known possibilities already, and potentially billions more. Now, in terms of how we're looking at them, or if we're looking at them, like you just asked a minute ago, if something is nearby like Mars, then in theory, obviously we can send over like rovers, drills, landers. Maybe we could even, which they have done and we've spoken about in this podcast before, you can go to Mars, you can bring back some samples, you can actually study them on Earth here properly. But if a planet is light years away, we are obviously not going to find life or investigate whether there's life by landing on it, because it would take us years to get there. Years and years and years and years and years. So I find this really interesting, but we are actually finding or looking for life on these other planets by looking at light. So telescopes like NASA's Webb can study the atmosphere of exoplanets and look for particular gases and chemical patterns that might hint at habitability or even possible biosignatures. So for distant planets, we are not really looking for a creature. We are actually looking for chemical fingerprints in the atmosphere that suggest something biological might be going on. And NASA also stresses that this would take a huge amount of observing time and multiple lines of evidence, because one possible biosignature on its own would not be enough to actually, for us to be able to confidently say, like, we have found life.
This sort of stuff, just like, I really struggle to get my head around it. I'm like, yes, logically it makes sense, but what do you mean? How? You know, because like we're not seeing this thing itself, and I do get that, but how do you know you're looking at life and not some just like weird chemistry? Like, how do you pull out from light signatures that you're looking at something that's a biosignature?
That is a good question. So let's talk a little bit more about how, for example, like the James Webb Space Telescope works. So like I think most people have heard about this. You've heard about like, what's the other one? Like the is it the Hubble one? I don't know. The Hubble telescope does something.
Yeah, the Hubble telescope.
Hubble telescope, that's it. Anyway, we're talking about the Webb one. So Webb is basically our most powerful space telescope for studying distant worlds in detail. And one of the things it can do is analyze the atmospheres of exoplanets, like I said. So it does that by looking at the light coming from a star as a planet passes in front of it. Tiny amounts of that starlight pass through the planet's atmosphere first, and different gases absorb different wavelengths of light. So by looking at which bits of light are missing, scientists can start to work out what gases are in that atmosphere. And this technique is called spectroscopy, and it is one of the main ways that we study planets that are far too distant to ever visit directly, which I just think is so clever. Anyway, this matters because some gases could act as what we call biosignatures, which I just mentioned a second ago. But a biosignature is basically any feature, molecule, or pattern that could be evidence of life, either past or present. And on an exoplanet, that often means looking for gases in the atmosphere that are difficult to explain without biology. So oxygen is going to be the classic one that people talk about because on Earth, most of our oxygen is made by life. But methane is another interesting one because living things produce a lot of methane here too. And what gets scientists especially excited is not usually one gas on its own, but it's a combination of gases that shouldn't really coexist for long unless something is constantly replenishing them. So a good example is oxygen and methane together. Why are you laughing?
Because when you like when you boil it down to the crux of it, physicists or scientists are looking at farts on other planets.
For fuck's sake. We can always rely on you to be immature. Oh, no, I'm staying serious.
God.
I'm staying serious. Listen, if you guys want to laugh along with Taz in the background, go for it. I'm staying serious. Okay. Good example is, unfortunately, oxygen and methane together, okay? Because these gases react with each other. So if you found both in large amounts, you would want to know what is keeping them there. On Earth, as Taz just mentioned, life does a lot of that work. But this is where it gets tricky because a biosignature is not the same thing as proof, and NASA's really clear about that. So some of these gases can also be made by non-living processes, okay, Taz? Which means that the real challenge is working out whether the pattern you're seeing is actually genuinely biological or whether nature has found some other kind of weird chemical way of producing the same result. So even if Webb found something really exciting, it would not be an instant like, oh my God, we found life on another planet moment. It would just be the beginning of a really long process of checking, modeling, and just trying to rule out like every other explanation first.
Okay, let's say for one sec the checks are done, the evidence holds up, and scientists are now confident that this is real and there is life on another planet. What actually happens next?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that I feel like the questions at this point, they would just get so much more interesting, wouldn't they? Because like, it's not just we found life. I feel like your next question would obviously be like, what kind of life have we found? If it was something microbial, I personally would immediately want to know what it's made of, like how it stores information, how similar it is to life on Earth. So like, for example, does it use DNA or RNA? Does it use proteins? Does it rely on the same kind of amino acids? Does it have cells, membranes? I just feel like all of those would be the kind of details that would tell you whether you're looking at something that was like fundamentally familiar or something completely new. And NASA and the national academies both frame this as a huge part of life detection. So not just asking whether something is alive, but characterizing its chemistry, structure, and metabolism in enough detail to understand really what kind of life it is. And I think this is so interesting because if it did share really deep chemistry with life on Earth, I feel like that would raise so many really like important questions. Not because it would prove it evolved alongside us, because it would not, but it could suggest that chemistry that gives rise to life is more universal than we thought, or possibly that the raw ingredients of life are widespread and actually move between like planets or worlds more easily than we realized. And that is why scientists take things like meteorites and asteroids seriously when it comes to like origin of life research. And we spoke about this in actually back in the Origins season when we actually did an episode on the origins of life. And we spoke about the theory that the building blocks for life did actually arrive on Earth by like a meteoroid. So I feel like, yeah, that would be like my main question would be like, oh my God, like the same, they all could have come from like one individual place, and like meteorites are just like spreading out the building blocks of life across the universe, which I just think is such an interesting theory.
Yeah, that is mad. I also think that like, obviously we're talking about like chemistry and stuff like that. I don't know if you've heard of the chemistry behind like chimeras.
No.
It's basically like, I don't want to get this wrong, but like every like chemical like element is like a certain way, and its chimera is the mirror image of it.
Okay.
And basically all life on Earth is one orientation of the mirror image, but they've started investigating chimeras for like
Oh.
drug development, and scientists are like, so they developed the mirror image of, like, I don't know, a molecule to make it last longer, like drug property wise. But loads of scientists are like saying going against it, because if they created like a bacteria that was like a mirror image of life on Earth, then it would mean that we have like zero way to build an immune response to it, because like our body just wouldn't recognize it because it's like a mirror image. It like
What
all
the
of
hell?
our like systems on life on Earth are like adapted or evolved to
Yeah.
that mirror image. And so I'm just thinking like, oh my god, what if it was like the chimera of life on Earth? It was the flip.
That's really interesting. I've heard of the word chimera, and now you said it, I'm kind of like, yeah, that's dumb. Like I should really know what that is, but that is really interesting. And it's kind of going to go into like, I was actually going to say like that the other possibility, which you've kind of just hinted at it, but obviously, so the first possibility that I just mentioned is that we find life and it's similar to us, like it uses DNA, blah blah blah. That kind of supports the theory that like there are building blocks of life are being spread out across the universe by meteorites. But like you said, like there is another possibility that it's, I mean, this is kind of related to what you said, but not. Okay, so we have the meteorite theory, then we have this chimera theory. That's also really interesting. But it could also be that it just uses completely different chemistry, right? So then you're potentially looking at a genuine second origin of life in the universe. Like not just life in another place, but life that emerged completely independently to ours, that has a completely different molecular toolkit. And I think that's just so interesting, because then I feel like biology obviously stops looking like a one-off event that just happened once on Earth, and it looks like something that the universe might be capable of producing more than just once. And NASA astrobiology has explicitly highlighted this idea in the Mars context, um, by saying that if Martian life was molecularly distinct enough, it could represent a second datum for life, which would be one of the most important and insane discoveries that biology has ever had.
Yeah, that is like crazy to think. And also, my question is, would we even recognize it as life if it uses completely different chemistry?
Right, especially like we were saying earlier, if they were like what we would consider like an extremophile, they're in like a completely different environment that we deem somewhere that's like life couldn't exist. But if it's got completely different chemistry, then it could, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But
I
then you
also
could
think
go
like
so
one
deep
of
into that, because then it would be like, well, you could just change the whole definition of life itself. So, so
we're
it comes as
getting
a very
really
philosophical thing.
philosophical on
Yeah.
this season, aren't we? I also think like one of the strangest possibilities is that it might just not even use DNA. Like
Hmm.
that's like a real possibility. It might not even use DNA, which like in theory sounds pretty wild, but like obviously even on Earth, like DNA is not always the way that
Hmm.
biology handles information and makes proteins, because like obviously loads of viruses use RNA instead of DNA, so like that's variation here on Earth. So like you could only begin to imagine what it's going to be like on a completely different planet across the Milky Way or the universe. Like it's just so too hard to comprehend, I think, when you think about it like that.
No, it's so true. And like, yeah, obviously, we spoke about viruses earlier, and like you raised some interesting points, but yeah, like it literally could be completely different. But NASA do say that they like their strategy kind of takes that possibility really seriously, that there might be like completely
Mm.
different genetic systems, different chemistries. Also, I am getting a bit like
Mm.
philosophical here and a bit deep, but like we've also done episodes where we talk about like uploading your consciousness, and about how like our consciousness could like become like data and stuff. And like essentially that's like a whole, that's like, you know similar to DNA, like it's all data storage, isn't it? So maybe
Mm.
I'm just getting like too philosophical here, but yeah, I just think like it's so interesting because it just like completely changes like our whole, it could potentially change our whole definition of life. And it's almost like the
Yeah.
discovery itself would be like the easiest part, and then the hardest part would be everything that comes out after, like figuring out whether this thing is built like us, its
Yeah.
chemistry, whether it points to life being able to emerge in multiple different places. And I just feel like that's the kind of discovery that doesn't just add a chapter to biology. Like it's not just like, oh yeah, we found this, but it like literally would rewrite our whole understanding of biology.
Yeah, I honestly feel like every time we do a space related episode, I'm always like, what on earth? Like, it just blows my mind, obviously, because I'm more of like a biologist, but like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it just blows my mind.
Same.
But okay, we've spoken about like, I don't know, microbes and like things having different chemistry to us, but let's entertain it for a second. Like, let's entertain this idea for a second of what
Agreement.
if the life was intelligent? What if it was green man and not just like, yeah, like technologically, what would that even look like?
Mm. Yeah, no, this is a very interesting. I'm sorry, I think I'm saying about that about every single thing on this episode. I'm like, it's so interesting, but I obviously, evidently, I'm just interested by it all. But yeah, if it was so, okay, so say we found like some intelligent, yeah, there's some intelligent life out there. The cool thing is that we probably wouldn't actually discover it by seeing the little green men themselves. We would be more likely to discover it from a technosignature. So we spoke about biosignatures, but we also have
Mm.
technosignatures. And this basically means that we would find like evidence of technology rather than evidence of simple life. And that could be something like an artificial radio signal, a laser signal, or some other pattern that looks engineered rather than naturally produced. Now, NASA uses the term technosignature for exactly this kind of thing, signs that a technological civilization might be out there. And I just think that is such a weird thought because at that point you're not just like finding life, but you're actually finding evidence that somewhere else in the universe something has gone through its own version of like invention, engineering, maybe it's even had its own scientific revolution. There's something out there that's like built technology and has learned to manipulate the world around it, and that is such a different kind of discovery, I think, obviously, than like finding microbes, because microbes obviously
Mm.
will tell you like, okay, life exists, but technology will tell you that intelligence, problem solving, and maybe even like obviously like civilizations exist as well. And off the back of that, I think the really interesting question underneath that is whether advanced life always end up becoming more technological than biological. And this is a theme that we have explored before, but is biology just like the starting point, and do you eventually get to a stage where intelligence is no longer mainly limited by like your body,
Mm.
disease, aging, or even like a particular planet? Because if that is the case, then what we're really detecting might not just be alien life, but it might be what life becomes when it's had much longer than we have had to develop, which is just, oh sorry, I'm getting very philosophical, but I guess the other side of that is whether there are still hard physical limits that every civilization in the universe eventually runs into, because no matter how advanced you are, I mean, we assume, but maybe not, but we're assuming that we're still dealing with the laws of physics, right? So you're still dealing with energy, distance,
Mm.
time, entropy. But gosh, when we have episodes like this, I start linking back all of the past episodes, because now I'm thinking about the time travel episode and about how time is kind of like a man-made concept, and we're
Yeah.
assuming that all other civilizations would like run off these same laws of physics, but maybe they wouldn't, or
We spoke about
maybe,
like wormholes as well being like a possible
yeah,
thing, and it's like, it's just crazy, like crazy to think about because
it is. And maybe
um
like as well, because the other interesting point is that like they could have developed technology that's found ways around problems that we think are almost impossible, or whether it would actually show us that every intelligent species does actually eventually hit the same universal ceiling. Like you've just mentioned wormholes, and on our wormholes episode we was basically saying about how they've not been proven and like they're not a thing. But maybe that's just because like we don't have technology that's figured out how to use a wormhole yet, you know? Which I know I sound crazy, but this isn't crazy.
Also, we're talking about like time and distance and stuff. I think it was either I went to go see Brian Cox or it was a video of his, and he basically said like, unfortunately, where we are in the universe is literally, and even the Milky Way, sorry, we are like so far removed from like the center and like basically where the aliens would be having a party that like they probably wouldn't even bother looking for us, because we're literally so fucking far out of the Milky Way that it's like, even if they do know that we're there, they're probably like, I can't be fucked to go there. Like we'll go to this like solar system over here because it's closer, you know?
But then who decided that the center of the Milky Way is where it's all going on? Who decided that's where the
Because it's like so busy in the middle. Like there's way more like suns and solar systems in the middle of the Milky Way, and then like the further you get out, the distance between.
But who says that's not who that could be like? I'm just thinking that could be really chaotic and like things could be getting fucked up in there all the time. New planet hit with something. Starburst.
Yeah.
Whereas like maybe on the outskirts it's more sustainable for life. But then what is life anymore? I don't know after this episode.
But then if that's the case, then like they're still going to be really far away.
They are going to be far away. But there could be someone, there could be some green men pretty close to us. We just got to find them. We got to find their technosignature. They can tell us how to use wormholes. We can escape climate change.
Did you know that we've sent out a technosignature? It's a Beatles song.
No, I did not know this. And why Beatles? Couldn't we do JLS or something?
It was probably
Harry Styles.
Nicki Minaj, Anaconda. I don't know.
Oh my god, wait. Is that something it is? I got
Anaconda don't. My Anaconda don't.
Do you think we'll get copyrighted?
My anaconda don't. My anaconda don't want none unless you got buns, hun.
Just imagine the little green alien men hearing that. That's fucking funny.
It's better than the Beatles. Oh, I did say that.
No, I actually didn't know that.
People come for me for that.
That is very interesting. Yeah, gosh, I don't know. After these episodes, I just feel like, what is life? What's the meaning of life? It's all very interesting. So anyway, to round off this episode, to answer the question of like, what if we found life on another planet? Well, it all depends, doesn't it, Taz? What do you think after this episode? Like, it all depends what we find. What's the crack with what we find? Where do we find it? How do we find it? All of the things. And maybe we could find like some really intelligent green man civilization and they teach us how to use wormholes, and then we just worm off to another galaxy.
Yeah. But then in my mind, I'm like, maybe I would prefer to find like little microbes rather than like
saying. They don't sound so boring anymore, do they?
Well, it's more just like the intelligent green men could like want to inhabit Earth instead and like wipe us off, whereas little microbes, I don't know, they're probably not thinking like that, you know?
No, they're not. They're just innocent little microbes. So next time you hear microbes and you're feeling underwhelmed, just remember that they're not that bad after all, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you made an important point about like our technology advancing so much. I think we also covered this on like a previous episode, that our technology advances so much that we actually kind of like, we don't explore outwards, we almost like go inwards. And
yes, we did explore this idea.
Start
what was it called? Yeah. It had a name.
I don't remember.
There is a name to, is it the trans something theory? I don't know. Anyway, there is a name for it. But yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. We become so technologically advanced that like, I don't know, we upload our consciousness to a database and take up the space of a small quantum chip.
They're literally going to think that we're crazy. But what episode was that on? Because they need to go and listen to that episode.
could be. No, I feel like it was one of your episodes.
It was one of my
I was going to
episodes.
say it could be the origin of consciousness, but that was my episode.
No, it was listen, we'll put it on the screen. I'll find it and I'll put it on the screen if you want to go and listen to that, because it was very interesting. Like, you're probably listening and thinking, oh my God, these guys are crazy, like as if they're actual scientists. But like, for real, you have to go and listen to the episode. It's really interesting. But yeah, anyway, let us know your thoughts on today's episode, guys. And for now, we have so many laboratory stories to get through for season, because you guys have got so much to tell us. So let's get into the laboratory section of today's episode. This episode is sponsored by Cite, the smart citation tool for your everyday research needs. Taz, I don't know about you, but I think Cite really sets itself apart from other citation and reference tools.
Yeah, I feel the same. With Cite, not only do you have access to over 250 million papers, but it can summarize a paper into a report, format citations, and more.
Yeah, and not only that, but I also love that you can connect it to tools like ChatGPT, Claude, or Copilot, and it basically just upgrades how those tools actually handle research.
Yeah, so instead of getting a general answer, your AI is actually searching through a huge database of research papers. And the key thing is it's not just looking at the titles or abstracts, it's searching inside the full text.
Honestly, it's such a slay, because it just makes such a big difference, because a lot of important details don't really show up in abstracts. And I feel like most tools just miss that completely.
On top of that is the smart citations feature, which I think is one of the most useful features, because it doesn't just show how many times a paper's been cited, it also shows how it's been cited.
Yeah, you can see whether other researchers have supported the findings, contradicted them, or whether they've just mentioned them. So it gives you a much clearer picture of what other experts in the field feel about it.
It also helps with access. So if a paper is available to you, Cite will help you get the full text.
So if you want to try it, you can head to cite.ai, or you can find the link in today's episode or video description. Setup only takes a minute, and you can use the code on screen now for money off. And thank you so much to Cite for sponsoring today's episode. But for now, let's get back into it.
Okay, so today's laboratory starts with the tagline. I got kicked out of my lab group after exposing my PhD supervisor.
Oh my God.
Juicy. Okay, so it goes on to say, I got kicked out of my lab group after passing my qualifying exams because I exposed my advisors a lack of support for me to apply for a fellowship that I had very high chances of getting. Now, this situation dates back to 2024. I was on my second year of my PhD, and I realized that my advisor wasn't very supportive of me. I had actually secured a co-op internship at a very prestigious institution, and after I came back, I found the lab full of safety infractions. So things like broken glass clogging the sink, a 5-litre jug of toluene on an open bench, next to a bottle of peroxide and hydrochloric acid, used needles scattered on the hood surface, etc., etc. I don't need to go on. I reported this to my advisor, and the next week he removed me from the safety office position. What? This started a campaign by him to sabotage everything for me. He made the lab group retake the lab group picture without me, and instead use that one from now on.
That is so petty. That is the pettiest thing I've ever heard in my life. No, I actually cannot. Sorry, that is one of the best things I've heard on this podcast. That is so, that is peak academic pettiness.
That is peak academic pettiness. Retaking the lab group photo without you in it. Wow.
I'd low-key be happy as well. Cool, I don't want to be, because they're always awkward. You always feel like a school kid on the first day of school. They're just always so awkward, and they're
so
always ugly them. What do you mean? I don't want it on the lab website. Take it down.
Also, if you're not in the lab pic, they have to, in acknowledgements, post another picture of you. So
do they? Oh yeah, on the end slide or something. That's true.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. He also refused to review my manuscript for one whole entire year. Anyway, I finally passed my qualifications last fall, which made me eligible for this prestigious fellowship that had a very high chance of getting. But the week of the deadline, he ghosted me. And at this point, I spoke with the director and he spoke with my advisor, who then fired me the very next day with no notice. Now I'm being forced to master out.
Wait, can you be forced to master out if you pass your qualifying exams? So for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what qualifying exams are basically where you go from being a PhD student to a PhD candidate, and essentially it just means that like you're going to get the PhD basically.
You pass the qualifying exams because you can answer like the questions that are posed to you. You know enough about your projects, like you basically show that you have the knowledge to do a PhD and be autonomous in a PhD, because obviously with a master's it's like you're guided quite a lot, and like I don't know, it's not necessarily your own discoveries. You're kind of like working off the back of like an already established project or something, whereas a PhD you very much form your own hypotheses and you do your own analysis and you figure out your own direction and stuff like that. So it basically determines that you are a good enough candidate to do that because you know enough and you can answer questions about it basically.
Yeah, so if you fail your PhD qualifying exam, then you have to master out, don't you? You like take the master qualification rather than continuing to get your PhD. Yeah. Gosh, where to start? I'm still hung up on the lab picture.
All in all, it just doesn't. Also, like removing them from like their safety manager role in the lab because she found all of these safety incidents within the lab. Like what? That is messed up.
Just giving, like, to me, I'm thinking the supervisor is maybe like a little bit incompetent at their job and they're aware, so they don't want somebody in the lab who's going to be like speaking up and exposing that. I mean, obviously the listener has literally said that they are pretty aware that they got kicked out because they exposed the supervisor, but what got me is they said like lack of support, but then it seems like this all started because you were exposing the bad practice in the lab. So if anything, I would say like you were like, the whole reason is because he's annoyed that, or they're annoyed that you exposed them for exposing the bad lab practice rather than exposing his lack of support. I think his lack of support seems to had come after he felt like you'd exposed him, because then he was like refusing to peer review your manuscripts. Can I just say that would be the most irritating thing ever, because like you can't really publish. You can publish and do your PhD without your supervisor's approval. At least you can here in the UK, because a lot of countries you can't actually do that. But the way like the scientific like publishing process is set up, you actually really, as a PhD student, cannot publish your work without your supervisor's support, because like obviously they're the ones who have the grants, who are paying for all the publication fees and stuff.
They conceptualized it.
Yeah, and like I mean, as a PhD student, you're not going to try and publish something without your PhD supervisor support. But that's just bizarre to me, though, right? Because that's literally his career. So I keep saying this is my unconscious bias getting through, which we do all the time on this podcast.
We actually do.
This is their career, right? So like, I'm so confused why they would be holding up a manuscript like this, all in the name of just like being mad at you. But it seems like that is what they're doing, because why else would they not want to
I can believe that. I know of like,
really, I've
had many stories where people are a bit like not fussed about a manuscript because they're being petty about the person. So many.
I guess it depends as well. Like if they're in like a big lab, like I've only ever really been in like small labs where the manuscript is the ultimate goal, and it's like that's what's wanted. Like we want to get that out quick. So I just can't imagine that. But I guess you're right. If you're in like a really big lab where there's papers literally being churned out, then people will really be that petty.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But then it's like, if it's a huge lab, how are you getting away with all of these bad lab practices? Because listen, I don't work in a lab, but I know broken glass in the sink ain't safe.
No, definitely not. And like needles and stuff. But yeah, I'm quite surprised that like she reported it to like someone at the university, and then they actually spoke to the advisor, and then after that fired them.
But not that I'm saying that I don't believe the listener, but like, can you fire a PhD student?
I
Like,
guess an
genuine
advisor can be like, I'm not supervising you anymore. I reckon I guess they
That's
can
what
say,
happened.
you're not doing this project anymore. It's my project. I don't want you on the project. I guess they can do that.
Oh my
And then
God.
you have to then find a new project.
But that's crazy though, because imagine that actually happens to you like in the final year of your PhD. Like, what do you actually do? Because what do you mean, babe, that this is my project at this point? Or at least this is our project. Isn't there like
Yeah.
some like rules against like IP and like how much you own of like your research and stuff? Like, I'm pretty sure there is. I can't remember what they are. I remember us being told about them in our first year. Like, they actually told us about what the rules are about like what you own versus what the university own. And obviously it's all biased towards the university. So yeah, they probably could be like, you're not on this project, get out. But surely the listener would have a case to like go to like someone higher and be like, I don't know, say something.
Yeah, but then it's at that point you're trying to dispute what your own advisor's saying. Like, would you like how do you work on a PhD under someone who doesn't want to be your supervisor?
Well, I guess if you're in your final year, you can do it, right?
Well, she's in it, or they're in their second year.
Okay, that's a bit more tricky. I don't know. It depends on how far along you are, and also like other like me at my where I did my PhD. I definitely could have gone to like another advisor because there was enough people who worked in like similar fields that could have helped me. And then also obviously I was a bioinformatician, so like I didn't need much financial support. But I guess if you're in a position where you need like financial support and like you need to be in that particular like actual laboratory, then yeah, what the hell do you do? If they don't want you in there, like literally what do you do?
Yeah, I think they would have to pivot and do a new PhD with a different advisor, or
No,
like
that's
see if they
one.
can somehow use the data that they've got and do like pivot and do something different than they planned.
Oh my God, I'd have a breakdown. Like, I'm not saying that in like a jokey way. I would genuinely have had a breakdown. I wouldn't have known what to
Yeah.
do because that would just be so unfair. But I guess that is probably reality of what could actually happen. So I'm
Yeah.
intrigued to what the listener's done and like how they're dealing with it, what they're doing. Like,
Well, they said that they're being forced to master out, so I guess they're like taking the masters. But I wonder if they then I'm gonna apply for another PhD.
I hope they do. But then I feel like this would just, if it was me, this would just put me off so much. I'd be like, I don't know, that would be a lot to like go and do another. This is such a rare occasion.
I don't even know
like
how to comprehend that.
Like, I've never heard of this happening to anyone before. So
yeah, because usually people ask us for our opinion on like what to do next, but I guess like we can't really advise on what to do next because like the decision has already been made for the listener. Like, they're being forced to master out. Surely they could like go to the university and be like, I reported like misdemeanors to you by my advisor.
Yeah.
Why am I now being the brunt of that? But then I can then see their argument in that they're like, you're clashing heads with your supervisor. They don't want to supervise you anymore. So like that project is kind of...
Okay, so find another solution that isn't me mastering out. Because that's like a whole 2 years of your life. Like, that's a long time in your life. And I'm inclined
to like they're missing out on this like fellowship and stuff.
Yeah, like don't be, I mean, the fellowship, unfortunately, I feel like I can see why if you don't have your supervisor's approval and you are not part of like a particular lab anymore, like I can see how that would potentially harm your chances. But what I will say is like, also, sorry, Wilma's just like not sitting down. If you're not watching, my cat is just like walking all over me, literally and figuratively. But yeah, what I will say is if you had already like nearly got onto this really great fellowship, like obviously that speaks a lot to like you and your abilities. So I think like you're obviously the type of person who could make that happen again, as frustrating as it is to lose that opportunity. But I just don't think that you should, I mean, ultimately it's up to you, and you might be at a point where you're like, I don't want to be in this program anymore, like get me out of this program, get me out of this uni, in which case fair enough. But if that's not the case, like I do think you have a case to go and speak to people and like not be bullied out of your program, because this is 2 years of your life. Like 2 years of your life is a long time, but also I'm sure you've put financially a lot into doing this. So like, I don't think you should be bullied out for this, even if it means it's not the PhD that you ultimately wanted, and like it's not going to be the thesis that you ultimately wanted. Like at the end of the day, Taz, do you actually like, I don't think your thesis matters that much. Like I feel like your papers matter a lot. Who the fuck is actually reading my thesis? Anyone who's hired me, have they ever read my thesis? I think more if you've got papers, that's more important.
It is, but usually, like, if you're applying for a job, the PhD is a requirement in a certain field. So, like, I had to show
like, the actual content of your thesis, as in, like, if she stays on the program, then the thesis is probably not going to be what she wants because she's not going to get to do the experiments that she intended on doing. So she might have to pivot her topic. But, like, ultimately getting the PhD, if that's your goal, like, it doesn't necessarily matter what the content of your thesis is that much. Do you agree on that?
Yeah, and I do agree, and I also think that the first year and a half of a PhD is the hardest because you're trying to adapt to the PhD life, like being in the lab. You've got steep learning curves in the lab and the techniques and stuff like that, and then also doing background research. So I actually think like if you could pivot, it would be a lot quicker for you to like catch up on your PhD because you would have the lab skills. Hopefully you would do it in a similar research area, so you probably would pick up very quickly where you left off. So I don't know, like I wouldn't feel I mean, I would understand why you felt if you feel discouraged, but
100%.
Yeah, I honestly think the first year and a half, you don't get any data in the first year and a half either. Like
so rare,
you just don't.
So
It's all learning. Like you're probably lucky if you get like, I think you get the majority of your data like at the end of second year, beginning of third year, if you're in a UK.
Yeah, I feel like it's the end of third year. It's when most people get it. Like they get their final, you know, their most important thing.
Yeah.
I guess it's different for everybody's so different. Every PhD is so different, but
third year is like the vast majority of like all your data and stuff. Yeah. So it is discouraging, but it's not unsalvageable.
I agree. So if you're happy to master out, then great, you've mastered out. You're not in the lab picture, in the awkward lab picture, so it's all good. But if you don't want to master out, I do feel like you have options. Like you should definitely speak to someone and like don't be afraid to like stand up for yourself. And it might not be what you wanted, like exactly as in the content of your thesis, but at the end of the day, in 5 years' time, if getting a PhD is what you want, like you might regret allowing yourself to be bullied out of this situation. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, the lab picture I feel is a win. So
yeah, I agree. Take the small wins. You don't want to be in that lab picture anyway. Because also, do you find that those lab pictures, they last for years and years, and like so many people come and go, and then the lab picture that you're using has like half the people aren't even like in the lab anymore.
It's so true. It's so true.
It's pointless.
Well, anyway, you have to email in and like give us your thoughts after listening to this and tell us.
Let us know what you're gonna do.
Yeah, 100%. We want to know. Ultimately, just do whatever feels best for you because that's the most important thing. And if any of our other listeners have a similar story that you guys want to share with us, don't forget we have a brand new website, socultured.com. You can head over there, click on the laboratory page where you can anonymously, I can never say this word, say the word for me.
Anonymously.
Submit your own story and we will react to
Teamwork.
But with that, we will see you guys next week in episode 3 of What If. Bye, everyone.
Bye.